Okay, so different episode today. I've wanted to create this episode for a while, and so I decided that if I do it on my own, I'm immediately just going to get hated in the comments. So I'm going to drag you two down with me. Uh, so
Yay!
Oh, I'm always ready for some more hate.
my gaming bro regulars, Randy and Darcy, are joining me for the episode. Say hi, guys.
Oh, hello.
How's it going?
So the episode itself, obviously, I haven't told you what I was going to record on. I'm just throwing you in the deep end. I wanted to talk about with the potential arrival of version 3. What were the biggest pros and cons of the edition? Like, what did they get really, really right? And what did they get really, really wrong? That potentially, if we could rewind time, like if I could turn back time, what would I get rid of? Who wants to start?
Hmm.
Do you
You
want to start
reckon,
with a
Dars?
pro? Or do you want to start with a con?
Well,
Let's start with the pro because we everyone's used to the salt, so let's give them some sugar instead to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
hmm.
Um, I think so. One of the biggest pros of it is the rending, and then giving it the dedicated rending amount. So rending 6, rending 4, to
So bracket
differentiate.
of values for
Yeah,
special
bracketed
renders.
values. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's a
100%.
big up.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I would say also, like, not just the bracket values and rending, but just in general, like to morale, to concussive, things like that. Actually,
Mm.
Yeah,
having a more nuanced chart as opposed to, well, all rending is the same, and then having different terms for, like, oh, it's rending, but it's not. It's, you know,
Yeah.
this is
Or
this
it's like,
is something similar to rending, but it's ever so slightly different, so therefore it's got a different name. That's when the rule
mm,
gets confusing. When it's just
yeah, it is.
this plus brackets for the value, so simple. And then they went ahead and added breaching, which I don't mind as a mechanic, but it's basically, why didn't they just change rending?
Just keep rending as it is. That would have been the better option. Just have rending and then have the bracketed values and then just fuck breaching off altogether.
well, I
It's
don't
because
know.
they didn't. It's because they don't have much AP2 anymore. Is why they bought in breaching.
Well, that's part of it. But more so, I think it's because like the only difference between breaching and rending is that rending is an auto wound on the value, whereas breaching is not. And secondly, the rending gets the additional armor pen versus vehicles.
Yeah,
So the sort of star for breaching as a weapon series is plasma weapons.
yeah. Which
Which
I hate. I wish they were AP2 gets
yeah,
hot.
that's some salt for later. But
Sorry,
it's
Dust.
no, it's all good. For the most part, they went to breaching 4-up. Some of them have rending 4-up on the heavier ones, like the Executioner Plasma or the Gravis Plasma found on Dreadnoughts.
Mm.
Um, but one of the main criticisms or things they wanted to change about Plasma was it was just too good in the developers' opinions last edition because it was just an all-rounder and good at everything. It was too good into vehicles. That's part of the reason why they dropped from AP2 to AP4. The other one was, as Mac has gone on lots of times, they want to make infantry as well as Terminators much more viable to foot slug up the board. And if you
Yeah,
leave rapid fire plasma, not so good.
it deletes
Um,
shit.
yeah, just delete shit. And if you gave it rending 4-up, it would actually turn into a better
Start
anti-tank
slagging
weapon.
rhinos and shit.
Not even rhinos, land raiders and stuff. Just
Oh,
because
really?
maybe
Strength
not land
7?
raiders. Yeah,
Not
but
land
strength
raider.
7 with the extra D3 you can go up to 10.
So you could basically start cracking into your front of your predators and Sicarans.
Yeah, you'd have to roll
Sixes.
pretty well, 6 and
Yeah.
6. But you can take a lot of. You can get 20 shots of a 10-man support squad or
Yeah.
plasma cannons. So it's like that's sort
Yeah.
of why. And I do like the small bit of nuance between the rending being able to automatically wound, whereas the breaching. So they're very similar rules. And for a lot of new people this edition, it was one of the things we had to sort of explain a lot. I
Yeah.
noticed, but I think having both is actually a good thing. Just that little bit of extra granularity.
Okay.
But yeah,
Yep.
I totally agree.
I would say another positive, the psychic phase, psychic powers in general. Obviously, there is one discipline that's just a smidgen different to the rest.
Is that telekinesis? Is that
Telepathy.
telepathy?
Telepathy, the long and short of it, because there'll be people who aren't quite aware listening because they haven't been on the receiving end. Telepathy has several abilities that you can just essentially shut down 1 to 2 units of the other person's army per psyker that you have. Just a single psyker can be capable of. Where the unit can't move, can't react, can't, and in this edition, that's a huge deal. Like just shutting down an entire unit for a turn where there's just, you're removing all of the mechanics that unit has available to it. And there is no stopping this ability. There is no fighting this ability. It just happens to you. It's a really punishing when it goes off. And it kind of like, if you're the person who's using it, it's an amazing tool. But if you're the person on the receiving end, it's a real, punch to the balls moment.
Yeah, it hurt.
I
had it used against me once or twice.
Yeah, but
I don't see many people running them, actually, to be honest.
Yeah, but that's because of like self-control, I think, more than anything. So, but the other psychic powers are in a mostly good place. If anything, they could use a little bit of tuning up, I would say.
Yeah. I think it's not even tuning up. There's just a couple of them that need a slight rewording of the timing. The first one that comes to mind is the Biomancy power. Just changing the wording on the timing to allow you to use it in the opponent's turn or have it carry over to the opponent's turn. So you keep it for a whole round, essentially. The +1 strength and or toughness.
Yeah,
and that's enough. I think off the top of my head, Pyromancy might need a little bit more to it.
Yeah, things like the invul, like where you're creating a shield where it's like, oh, I'm giving a unit an invul save. Like, you think how many units that's actually like applicable on? It's not many. Like, the stuff you want to protect is going to be like your Terminators and stuff. And it's like, well, if you're getting to the point where you need to throw up like a 5-up invul over your heavy support squad, like something's probably gone pear-shaped. Because you should be out of range anyway, Like,
I think when I think of that, I think of like protecting command squads because they're quite a high output unit, and with the banner they become scoring, but they don't have no invols.
Unless they're in power armor, though. Unless they're in power armor, you're going to be in Terminator armor, so you're going to have an invul, and it's probably going to be better. And there's
I'm talking about specifically the artists for armor ones have no invul. The artists for armor.
I mean, you can put breaching shields. You can put boarding shields on them. You can put combat shields on them.
Yeah,
there are ways around it.
Up. Yeah.
Well, the big problem for that particular application, Randy, is because they're a melee unit. You want to be pushing them up.
Yeah, you're probably going to throw them in a transport, right?
Well, not just the transport. Even if you gave them like bikes, jet bikes, or jump packs, which pretty expensive. The problem with the telepathy power specifically is that you can't move once you use it.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like
it hamstrings the librarian to be out floating around on its own.
Well,
he can't use it on that unit if he's detached from it.
Yeah, it's got to be the librarian and his unit. I'm pretty sure from memory. But either way,
it's a shooty thing. Then it's a put a dome over me and protect me.
Well, but it's like that, and it's more for a defensive castle. But
yeah.
But it sounds kind of negative. But we're saying like if anything, the powers could use a slight boost, but they're in a good place. And the way that they're utilized is in a good place. It's not the frustration that was the psychic phase, basically since its introduction in 6th edition 40k, where if you had a player who was utilizing it, like a Thousand Suns player, cough myself, it was a long, convoluted phase that you had to almost universally walk the other player through each turn.
Yeah, I found that.
And it was frustrating too in previous editions because you didn't know what power you were getting. It was off this randomized bullcrap chart. Now it's
right.
You know what powers you've got, which makes an awful lot more sense because the Psyker doesn't just rock up to the battlefield on the day and just go, well,
the best.
Well, guys, it might be like really good for us. It might be really bad. Let's roll those dice.
Good luck, everybody else.
and it was extra frustrating last edition. And it was one of the bad things about 1.0, the psychic phase. I railed on it many times because sometimes you could have hundreds of points invested into a psyker and get no return. And that's like, if you got a shooting unit, you know the return. You know every turn I'm going to go through. I'm going to a firing phase, you know. But if you had like a Witchfire power on a Psyker, it was like, okay, I had to roll. How many dice do I get? All right, now I have to decide how many of those dice I'm going to use to try and cast. Oh, the other person gets the same amount of dice that I rolled to dispel with. Okay, I've gone through those steps. Now I have to select my target, and now I have to go through the to hit and to wound part of it as well. The power doesn't just auto hit and auto wound. No, I've still got to roll. Like how many? Like it was really convoluted. That doesn't happen this edition. It's a lot more streamlined.
It is smooth, yeah.
Good streamlining, not bad streamlining. Like
that is actually another good. That is a pretty good positive.
So I think that is definitely another good thing that they did in 2.0. What else was good in 2.0?
Plastic.
Not just the plastic, but just adding on to Macca's point about you get to pick the psychic powers now. Yeah. Being able to pick the warlord traits, rather than having to roll on a table, I think is also another nice change. It allows you just to have that bit of extra flavor while also having it consistent, and you can really theme towards a particular character. I know there's several Ultramarines players, for example, that went down the route of Trader Ultramarines because they had that really interesting Warlord trait for traders only.
That's right, yeah. Same with the White Scars one too.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a White Scars one that got the Trader one as well?
Most legions have a Trader. Most legions have a Trader and a Loyalist trait.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
They usually have one Trader, one Loyalist, and one whoever trait.
Yeah, totally agree, Darcy.
Yeah.
The downside, though, of that, because, pros and cons, they're not all warlord traits were created equal.
Yeah, that's true.
Which does lead to a lot of predictability of what trait is going to be taken by a person.
In saying that, it's not as brutal as it was. Like, it's not like they're totally shit, though. Even the ones that are, like, less good, I find, in 2.0, when you were playing 1.0, you were rolling for them and you were always hoping for that one. Whereas now there are some legions where you are stuck choosing, like the Iron Warriors, for instance. They've got a couple of really good ones you can choose from, and I like the fact that it's not like they didn't make one really good one and then all the rest are fucking terrible. It's like this one's good, but this one's kind of good too, but the worst one's only a little bit worse than the others.
Yeah, but you can have Legion like the Imperial Fist, where it's like
they're all good.
That weapon skill warlord trait. Yeah.
That is good. I use it, and
shocking.
Yeah. You would, you fucking 40k power gamer.
It's so good.
That's the positive. Unfortunately, small downside at the same time. I feel that the warlord traits themselves, there's a lot of there's the haves and the have-nots, as Macca was saying, but I feel like there's also less creativity in them. Or maybe not creativity, but the old warlord traits, not necessarily the one in the Legiones Astartes table or the Solar Auxilia table, but
the basic
generic
rulebook ones, the 3 tables.
The basic rulebook. It was 4 tables, I think. It was strategic, personal, and then 2 others that I can't remember off the top of my head. But I feel like the generic warlord traits in the book, while good, I'm actually quite a fan of the Master of the Defense one, I think it is. The one that gives you a bonus shooting phase reaction and makes all...
the Architect of Devastation, I think you're talking about. Is that the one?
Yeah, it might be called that. But it's the one that gives you Warlord and his unit pinning on its shots. It's really nice, because I've been playing a slow grow league the past month and a half, with Iron Warriors, and I decided not to take a Praetor or a Beatstick HQ.
It's really called, nice. Yeah, it's the Dodecadron or whatever it is.
No, not that one. It's just the generic one, not the Iron Warrior one.
Okay.
But it gives the Warlord and his unit pinning shots as well as an extra shooting phase reaction.
Gotcha.
And it's been nice to not go down the melee beat stick route for the HQ and have some traits that support it. Not gonna lie, tons of fun having not Siege Tyrants, Iron Havocs with autocannons with that Warlord trait, because then the autocannons have like precision shots on a 6-up, pinning, Plus on strength first vehicles, rending 6 up, and it's like 20 shots for a unit of 10. It's just really fun.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's pretty
too have too
cool.
many friends, Darcy, and need to downsize. But no, that's all right. So that's three sort of good things they did well, out of the gate. I feel like the list of cons is going to be long, but I want to start with what are like the most pertinent cons, and I'm going to go out and say it was in my uh, post Festivus list of criteria, and that is the awful update rate. When was the last time we got a full, decent, in-depth FAQ for the system as a whole? Like just core rules alone, let alone
Yeah.
December last year.
yeah.
It's
So
been a while.
it's been a solid year. It has indeed, and even then, that update, it's like 10 pages long. I think 6 of those pages are like reactions only.
It's
So,
missing a lot of
so
stuff that we picked up on almost straight away after like there was a couple of games in and we were like, well, that needs to change, and it still hasn't been touched, and it's sort of like leaving it up to like us to self sort it, or like, Mournival doing it their way. You know what I mean?
yeah, and it shouldn't, like, I think it's great to have ownership as a community and create our own solutions to problems, but at what point do you say the problem has been around for long enough that the company should actually be like, if you've delivered a faulty product, I expect resolution. If it's a video game, for example, they patch it.
Yeah.
Like, and to me, this is a very, very comparable product to a video game.
Yeah, definitely.
Why aren't they patching the product? And instead, it's like a case of, well, you're going to buy it. And what I'm starting to feel like is the quality is an unknown. Like, you're just going to get whatever quality, and we're not going to do anything that if there are issues to fix the quality of the product. And that is not a good feeling as a customer. And
Well,
it's where a lot of
considering
my ire and my anger towards them comes from, is that's not how you should be treating your customer. In consumer law, if Games Workshop was a bigger company, like on the scale of an Apple, they would be getting reamed by
yeah,
the consumer watchdog. But because they're so small comparatively to the big players, they're able to skirt under the radar, because if they were like an Apple, I guarantee it, consumer law would be going, hang on a minute, you're delivering a faulty product that does not perform as intended. Like,
yeah,
you need to do something about it. And we
grip
have
this shit
seen,
up.
yeah, we've seen it hit video games. Like in Australia, the ACCC is very litigious in Australia, the consumer watchdog. They have slammed Steam, they've slammed Sony. Like, they are not afraid that if Bethesda copped it big time, they are not
What, in
afraid.
Australia, did they?
Oh yeah. So things like refunds, like, because a lot of these companies have refund policies where they'll say like, oh, once you play the game, you can't refund it. And Consumer Watchdog Australia's like, well, no, if they play a game and they decide it's shit, and they, you need to play it for a certain amount of time to understand it's shit, because you've got to make up your mind, and then they want to return it, that's perfectly fine for customers. So, so, so that's why Steam removed like that refund time limit. It was because of Australia.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yep. Because they said, well, like, how can you form a fair opinion of something if, because you can get honeydicked, right? They can give you the best content in the first 10 minutes, and then the rest of the
Yeah.
game plays like ass, or maybe it get to a certain level in the game and it hard crashes every time.
Or
Right?
it's not or the game itself's not as advertised, like.
Exactly right. And you don't know this until you reach a certain point. And I feel like, is that not the same as Warhammer? Like, I get to a certain point in the game and it hard crashes practically, or it's not as advertised. Like, oh yeah, it looks all right, and all of a sudden I come across all these game breaking faults. Not to diverge too far off topic, but there are a lot of, those are just some examples of where the ACCC has stepped in. They've also stepped in on things like pricing, false advertising, deceptive marketing,
Yeah.
a whole bunch of stuff.
Could you imagine if they could tap into that FOMO market with
FOMO is one of the things that they have slammed several companies for in the past. Black Friday is a huge one here in Australia, because if a company does the old mark it up to then do the false markdown, yeah, they have handed out some hefty fines for that one.
oh wow, so they can actually get pretty heavily fined, can they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're talking to the tune of millions in some cases. They've fined big companies.
Wow. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. Not to that extent, right? Like I
Yeah, I
wasn't
believe
aware that
it's
they.
60 days. So if you can't be within 60 days of like Black Friday, that
Yep.
you increase the price of a product. So you can't do the whole like mark the $1,000 item to 2,000 and then say 50% off when they put it back to 1,000. It has to be done.
Oh,
It has
cheeky.
yeah, it has to be done more than 2 months out. Anyway,
Oh,
if Games
okay.
Workshop was a big player in Australia, they would get slammed. Is what I'm
Yep.
getting at, and they don't. They have brought out this edition and they refuse to target the things that are an actual problem. Like, I could list you 150 fucking things off the top of my head, I reckon, in rapid fire of that just need FAQing. Like Thunderhammers, Contempt of Dreadnought pricing, Brutal Rule in general, right?
Yeah.
Night fighting, fear, all of these different things, reactions,
You're
shooting
just
reactions, multiple shooting
fed.
reactions in one turn, right? I could go on and on and on, right? And just drop them one after the other. And it's like,
Yeah.
they are easy is the worst part to fix because Maudeville have done it, Panoptica have done it, right? And wound tanking is another great one, right?
Yeah.
It's like, how come someone
So
sticks a
so
sergeant
we
out the
fix
front of
that
their squad?
ourselves.
We fix that ourselves because you can either go one of two routes, right? With wound tanking, for the audience who is not aware, when you go, I'm getting shot by a bunch of weapons that ignore the saves of my Space Marines. Oh, but I have a sergeant out the front who has a 2+ save. Why don't I just put all of these wounds on him? Roll them one at a time. Oh, look, I rolled a 2+. 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 And they just, somehow, the sergeant is fucking Neo from the Matrix. And every single round coming into his unit, he just dodges, right?
It's a big change from doing lookout sir rolls, right?
Yeah.
You're trying to save your sergeant and you're using him to tangle the wounds.
Yeah, and the rest of the squad is like, this is just fantastic. What a great guy this sergeant is, taking one for the
He
team.
leads by example. This gets camp bad.
Yeah, for me, there is two ways of solving that problem, and I've mentioned it in my what I would change in a Macca edition of the game, right? In the Circle edition of the game, which we have discussed at length playing in my shed.
Yeah.
And it's either you go to initiative, so you can't take more wounds on the character than they have initiative, which is going to basically be 4 for most cases. Or you say for every one you take on that, you've got to take another one on someone else in the unit before you can come back to them. Or the extreme version of that, which is it must go through everyone else in the unit before it comes back to them. So there's 3 levels that you can go to there. I personally like the second or the third option more than the initiative thing, because I don't think it should be initiative based. They're like bullets moving through the air at 3,000 feet per second. Like, you've got good reflexes, but they're not that good.
Yeah. It's a convenient value, but it's not what the stats supposed to represent.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so I know it was a very, very, very long complaint, but yeah,
it works.
FAQing the game system with some examples of things that can be FAQ'd was what I was getting at. So I'm sorry it was so long, guys.
It wasn't too bad, mate. It allowed us to touch on a few bits on it anyway.
What else? Good or bad?
Good or bad? What do you reckon, Das?
I want to say one of the worst things they did this edition, and it's not necessarily how they've written the rules, but it's the fact that not 18, 2.5 years later, we've only really just sort of gotten up to where we were at the end of first edition in terms of units having rules. And while we have gotten some new units and some new rules for stuff that didn't exist in first ed, all of this shit should have been out day one. I'm not saying the campaign supplements and stuff, but why did it take like an extra 2-3 months for Mechanicum to get rules? Why did it take nearly 6 for Custode, Solar, and that to get rules? Why did
a year for Ruinstorm and Militia, and the rules are not even that complex for a year. They're not a year's work. They're an afternoon's work.
Yeah,
and then also just like not just that, but it was like when they bought them out as well, that they didn't it took a long time, and you'd think that when something takes a long time, it's because they really wanted to nail it and get it right. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't do that. Like your Imperial Militia, your Solar Auxilia, Sisters of Silence, everything feels really those all feel quite out of place in the current iteration.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I would also add on that taking those rules that like they print as like PDFs and then trying to sell them back to us in other books.
Oh, yeah, that was one of the big ones. I didn't purchase any of the hard copies of the campaign
You've
books
seen them at
because of
mine.
that.
How pathetic are some of those books? Like in
They're
person.
terrible. Like I think I saw some good artwork, a couple of bits of good artwork I like, but apart from that, I was never touching them with a 10-foot pole. I'm not going to pay for a book that I can download off Warhammer Community. Like and it's not just that. It's like, and the stuff that was in them, it just was subpar to what I expect of writers of a caliber of a game like this.
Apart from
If you're
like,
bringing,
sorry.
go
Apart
Mako.
from playing like militia tanks, I would also say that everything outside of like the core actual Weeper books is kind of shit to play with or against. Like Ruinstorm is not an army that performs well.
No, it's terrible.
Unless
I
you're
had
talking
one.
like 1,000-point games with archdemons.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
changes
it's
things.
the
Like
same problem
militia,
with
It's not fun.
Tyranids
you
had
can't
in
play militia,
40k.
right? Like they're an unplayable faction realistically because
Unless you're
yes,
playing a 1,500-point game
yeah,
with
yeah.
20 tanks
Against
against Outer Circle.
And well, there are things in there like militia, like you get charged by 2 Astartes units simultaneously. You just auto route basically. It's like, oh, obviously you can spam Lehman Russes, but spamming Lehman Russes only works because Vanquishers exist. Like it wouldn't work
Yeah.
if you spammed Lehman Russes with battle cannons.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like they didn't even write the books are very delayed to stick to Darcy's point, but they also didn't write them efficiently, or it doesn't feel like the people who wrote them spoke with the same people who wrote other books, if that makes sense. Because the
Yeah.
power gradient, like the power curve, is so vast, and I can't comprehend how someone who understands the edition, like, and understands the mechanics of it, could think that these armies were functional in this edition. Like, even a close
Yeah.
combat themed militia army, it's like that weapon skill chart is so punishing. You are
It
not getting
really
away.
is.
You are not getting away with weapon skill 2 or 3 dudes. I'm sorry. It's just
No.
even if you're bringing 500 bodies to the game, it's not happening.
Which makes a great point, Maka. The weapon skill in this edition, it's
awful.
it's not great. It can make things very difficult.
Should there have been? I think this is a pretty simple one because it's what I would implement. Should it not have been? There has to be more than 2 points of weapon skill difference before you start needing to roll like 5s to hit.
Yes,
Yeah,
I agree.
if the table mirrored the wound table, I wouldn't have an issue with that.
Yeah,
I think
thing is,
I feel like
if they want to make someone really go.
Let's say if you're fighting someone
interrupted.
weapon skill 5 and your weapon skill 4, they should hit you on 3s. You should hit them on 4s. If their weapon skill 5, your weapon skill 3, then you hit them on 5s.
Yep.
Because right now
Yeah,
it's a
agree.
weapon skill 5 arms race, where if
Weapon
no
skill
one
5 it just dominates.
yeah, no one is going to bring Terminators with weapon skill 4 and throw them up against an elite unit, except
wouldn't.
except as a roadblock.
Tarp hitting your fucking elite infantry.
Yeah, you're like, oh, cool. Like even Invictus Suzerain, who like a power armor, you're not going to throw Cataphracti Terminators against them and expect to win that fight.
No, they get their shit pushed in.
Because the weapon skill 5, you're like, cool, 2/3 of my attacks are going nowhere from the get-go.
And it's and it's AP at initiative too, right? AP to it.
Well, they can take Thunderhammers. So, like, you're fucked regardless.
Yeah, goodbye. It's nice to know you, friend.
Yeah, do not pass go, do not collect $200 redos.
Not just that, every single one of those fuckers is a character.
Yeah,
So if you want to do the wound shenanigans,
yeah,
I'll pass
true.
around so they all take 1 wound until it comes back around to the first one.
It's a great unit though. I like it.
I'm gonna bring up another negative now. I don't think there is a single good reaction in this system. reactions as a whole are an awful mechanic designed for those who have zero attention span.
Damn, you know what? That's me, unfortunately. I really enjoy doing stuff in the other player's turn.
Yeah, so do I. Like going to the bathroom, buying a drink for myself and the person I'm playing the game with.
But Randy, genuine question here.
Yeah.
Which reaction from this edition lets you do something in the opponent's turn that you couldn't already do last edition, with the exception of the movement reactions?
The return fires, right?
Sure. But Shroud reaction was just jinking before, as well as better cover saves in general.
Yep.
Your Overwatch was every unit got to do it last edition, not just one unit maybe.
Yeah, true. Overwatch was just baked in.
Interceptor.
Yeah.
Sure, return fire. That's a new one, and that was arguably done less so to give someone something to do in the opponent's turn, and more to balance out the power of Alpha Strike armies.
Yeah.
So I will. This is a controversial one, the reactions I know. Look, I would rather an I go, you go system, which they have their own flaws, and a lot of people were screaming to move to an I go, you go, and I get in my comments all the time, oh, when you make your edition, make it I go, you go.
Alternating activation, it's not I go, you go.
Wow.
You're saying, right?
That's what he means, yeah, essentially.
Yeah. So my big problem with that is that only works when you both have the same number of units. Because when you get to the end of the turn, there's still, the person's got 5 more units than you. Holy crap, does that shit spiral. But anyway, and it also means that whoever gets to go first that turn can have a huge impact. So it's not the superior system, it's trade-offs. Which I think
100%.
Now, reactions themselves. Sorry, Das?
Oh, I was just going to say, the other thing, it's... I go, you go tends to break down when the scale of the game gets too big with the number of model counts. Take Titanicus, for example, which is a GW game that uses alternating activations. When you get above, I haven't played it myself, but from what I've heard from others, once you get above maybe 6 or 8 Titans, or night groups, it just gets very unwieldy and very hard to keep track of stuff. And the game, you end up sort of taking progressively more and more time because it's an exponential amount more to deal with and contend with.
Well, think about what it's like when we play Sigma,
right?
When we play Sigma, Darcy, what it feels like. When you're trying to keep track of who's going what and when, and all right, now we're moving on to a different phase, and you got to go through it all again.
Age of Sigmar.
Yeah. Which is, I think, a pretty fun game system. But anyway.
Yeah.
The lore is terrible. But reactions, right? Reactions are a mechanic for, as I said, people with low attention spans who need to constantly be doing something. But that's not meant as an insult either, right?
No, I understand. I get it.
But even worse, it's a mechanism for people who cannot play the game. Controversial opinion, this one, but it takes away the things that make a game interesting and dynamic. It's like, oh, do I move my unit forward to take this shot? I'm going to be putting it within range of someone, charging me or shooting back next turn.
Yeah, you're right.
Do I or don't I? Now it's have your cake and eat it too, because it's like, okay, I will do that because when they move towards me, I'm just going to do a move react away. It costs me nothing. There is no ballistic skill penalty. There is no movement penalty. It's just free bullshit. And the amount of people who have overexposed themselves, who normally I would be absolutely punishing them for overextending, I don't get to do that to this edition. And, to me, that's the game. That the game element is the making those risk-reward calls. And them not having to suffer the consequences of making a poor call and getting to have the cake and eat it too. And, theoretically, I have that ability as well, but I don't do that. I just I don't put myself into situations where I need a reaction to get me out of it.
I get what you're saying.
The amount of people who've moved a vehicle forward, it's like, cool, I'm going to fuckhand that vehicle next turn. I'm going to flip that fucking bad boy over and I'm going to penetrate it. I'm going to put 12-inch penetration rods into that thing.
I'm going to give it the old outer circle special.
Yeah, I'm going to fill that inner circle right up with, and
the inner circle.
But people then, they react away or they overwatch. And when And the risk reward on reaction fire, like take the Iron Warriors advanced one, fire twice with gets hot. If you're like a dreadnought, like a Mortis dreadnought, and you're down to, or like think of a Leviathan, right? You got like those cyclonic melter cannons, and you're down to your last wound, and you're taking 10 las cannons. You know you're not coming out of that alive. So
that's where it's going that turn.
So why aren't you going to use that reaction and fire like what is it like what would it be 12 multi-melter shots back into them?
Yeah.
Of course you're going to do it, right? It's just such a no-brain move because then you start asking questions. Well, how come every squad doesn't get to use all the reactions all the time? How come it's a mechanic that you start asking deeper questions? Because, all Marines have the same reaction speed. How come this tactical squad did a reaction, but now I've used my only reaction for this turn? Everyone else is just standing there going, well, that squad, dove for cover when they got shot at. I'm just going to stand still. It doesn't make sense. So reactions as a whole, as a mechanic, if you keep them, overhaul them dramatically next edition, but frankly, I would get rid of them as a whole and move back to previous edition where it's just there is a blanket ability that's available to every unit in every army in every phase.
What do you think the likelihood of that is now that they've been introduced and they've become sort of part of the game?
Well, they don't listen to feedback and they think that everything they create is gold. So
well, if that's the case, why are we going to new editions then, like in Heresy and 40k?
The reason is money. Every time there's a new edition, there's a significant bump in GW's bottom line.
It's sadly that simple.
And it's easy to print a book rather than a whole new army, right?
Yeah,
much easier.
This is a company that is so dependent on the FOMO sales and the hype of a new edition. Like take the starter box of this edition. It's an objectively bad starter set. And yet,
Age of Darkness set
for a starter set.
For a starter set, yeah.
Yeah, like why would you put a Spartan in a starter set?
Yeah, unbalanced forces. Why the 2 consoles with that loadout of war gear? Right, or the Soul Auxilia one's even worse. It's like a Dracasan in at this time of the year in this part of the country, located entirely within your kitchen. Yes. And a single sentinel which is designed to operate in units, yes, and a tank which is designed to operate in like squadrons with a command squadron and then an auxiliary squadron. Yes,
you want a multi-part plastic Praetor with a couple of different weapon options, a few tactical squads, a Terminator squad, and that's probably all you really need, right?
Again, like talking about SKUs last night. I know this is just dramatically off topic, so forgive me, audience. But when we're talking about like how I could have made all of the troops, veterans, assault, anything options, I could have done it with like 7 or 8 molds, and yet it's going to take Games Workshop 16 to 20, right? By the time if they ever do like Seekers and Recon and Breaches, because of the way they designed it, right? I could have done a way better job thanks to my previous employment experience. The same can be said of a HQ. It's like all these resin characters that they keep dropping. Like, here's your champion. Here's the trader champion with his My Little Hello Kitty armor. And here's the Siegebreaker. And here's what's the latest one that they did the other day? Fucking
that
Overseer.
The console or
that
something?
Was the Loyalist Overseer. That implies it's going to be a trader Overseer. It's like if they just done a fucking multi-part plastic kit for the HQ, but they couldn't. Because even though it's a lot easier for production and everyone would have loved it and people would have bought 5 to 10 of them, some people would have magnetized a few of the options.
In plastic as well?
In plastic, just a Praetor, which you can swap out the arms, the head, the backpack to make different characters, was sold like fucking hot shit.
Oh, it would have, yeah.
But really when they can charge you $50 to $70 per individual resin character instead, they would rather do that. So,
and then people aren't buying as much because a lot of people in the community don't want to use the resin. Some people don't want to wait for stuff to come from England.
It's a lot of bad decisions, right? But it's instead of those Age of Darkness starter Praetors that they dropped, imagine if they spent the mold resources on a multi-part Praetor instead.
It would have been killer.
I'd be like fucking Stan's dad with like the fucking internet porn, you know, like just
it
it was a ghost, you know, with the fucking ectoplasm all over the room. Like, and it would have been such an easy way for me to compliment them. I would have complimented the shit out of them. They did a good job of it. I really would have. Instead, we've got 2 new Praetors that are the size of like orcs because Marines now use orc rules, like where the biggest is the baddest. Anyway, back on point. Reactions, terrible. Yeah. They won't get rid of them because now they've introduced the mechanic. They will want to save face as riders, and they won't get rid of the mechanic. Instead, they'll double down on it and try and amend it in some capacity. Probably a bit closer to 40 case mechanics, I imagine, more like command point type system.
I reckon maybe make it 1 reaction a turn, not 1 every phase.
No, just get rid of them.
No.
I mean, get rid of them.
Like,
it's easier to have Overwatch on all units as snapshots, for example, than it is to
I like
have,
that better anyway.
Because it's an easy rule to apply. It's just all units have it. It's there. You can choose to use it. You can choose not to use it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
With reactions, the amount of times where you get to the end of the movement phase, you're like, oh, fuck, I should have done this. Right?
Mm.
The only one that's like guaranteed to go off every single fucking turn is return fire.
Yeah.
That's always being used. And if you're being charged, if you've only got 1 unit being charged, unless it's like a heavy support squad, rock and las cannons getting charged, that's going to Overwatch, the rest of the time you're just going to use brace and go, I'm going to deprive you of all the fucking bonuses you would have got from charging because, I don't know, I'm standing here harder than you are. Like,
it's funny you mentioned that. I've actually noticed a lot of us have stopped doing it because we keep fucking our morale checks and having the unit break and run away, and then get swept. The last out of like my group of boys that we play with, I think out of the last 20 attempts, 16 have maybe resulted in breaking, run away, and then of those 16, maybe 6 have resulted in the unit being swept straight away.
But now you're going into like...
It's only happened to me once.
Now you're going into a grey area for this edition though, Darcy, which is morale. Which needs to be discussed. So morale this edition is too low across the board. I think, yes, it was too high last edition, but the last edition didn't have morale modifiers like this one does, with like shell shock, fear. It's like pretty much you can always get a -2 if you want to in your army. If you want to build for it, every army can do it. Some can go to -3, effectively. Night Lords. But you can get to a very consistently to a -2 morale modifier, and if you can kill the sergeant out of a squad, that's functionally a -3. And if you kill the sergeant out of a squad and your Night Lords, you're effectively getting a -4. And when leadership's 7, that means most people are looking at 3s. No one's fucking making leadership 3s. I'm sorry. It's you know, it's no. So
it's a lesson in futility, right?
Yeah. So even if you've got a sergeant alive and it's only the -2, like shell shock 2 is very common. If you're shell shock 2 and you're taking a leadership check, your leadership 6. Well, 7's the average roll on 2d6. So you're more likely than not going to fail. And if you've lost your sergeant, you're almost destined to fail at 5. And I'm not saying that Hail Mary double ones don't happen. Yes, I get it. Randomness is a big element of these games. But just the raw basic maths checks out. You will fail an awful lot of morale checks once you hit leadership 6. And some factions, like Solar and Militia, are born in that leadership 6, 7 category.
They get it pretty rough, eh?
They have it super rough this edition. To the point where nobody except for the players rocking like these stubborn tercios with like a really specific set of combo rules to have stubborn tercios. They're the only people who are effectively rocking infantry in a non-marine army this edition.
Yeah, there's no reason for it.
Yeah, because
you're just not going to. You're just going to be too.
You're building and painting a ton of bodies for a huge amount of expense when you've got armor that will do the job better. So, I don't mind the idea of fear being a negative modifier on leadership. I don't get how it works with Marines. Like, what? It's nighttime now. I'm scared.
Yeah, I never got that either.
Like. And I never got Night Fight in general in this edition. Can I just add that? Like, you're Marines, so you've got the Ocularis organ, so you have like night sight built into you. Plus, the helmet
feels
has
like it was
night
just
vision
brought in
goggles. Like,
it feels like it was brought in just to make Night Lords better.
Randy, you and I have both been in the military and fought at night time. Were you scared, buddy, because it was night?
I was really fucking scared, especially if I didn't have my Ninox.
Like, yeah, like, I was no more scared than at daytime. I'm more afraid of the actual fucking rounds coming at me.
Yeah, exactly. Or fucking IDF coming in.
Like, yeah, it's Americans. I hope they know who are the friendlies. But you know, jokes aside, right? Morale has its issues, but in there's a plus, which is I do like the shell shock mechanic.
Yeah.
I think if you had 1.0's artillery, instead of being as devastating as it was in version 1, having it be like almost certain to pin units, like, you know, shell shock in that, and maybe breaching, that is going to go off because it's not breaching fucking 6+ like most arty is this edition, would have been a lot better in 2.0 as a better like combo of the two systems. If that
it's sad to see the hit that I really miss artillery in Heresy too.
Well, they brought in things like breaching, but with bracketed values, which we all universally praised, but they don't use it efficiently.
Yeah,
they don't really use it.
If you're getting hit with if you're infantry, Space Marines or not, because you're going to assume that the artillery that Space Marines use would have to be efficient against Space Marines, especially during a Heresy, right? Like I have like an expectation that it should be dropping bodies. If you're getting artillery fire in, you should at least be getting pinned if it even hits you. Yeah. Everything. Anything that's artillery whatsoever, if it's hitting you or even like in your radius, you should be getting pinned.
Yeah. So the shell shock mechanic should be more prevalent, and I think those bracketed value rules like breaching, like that really needs to be a lot better on things like artillery.
Yeah, I would say like breaching 3+ and shit to show just how dangerous getting artillery shelled is.
I don't think I wouldn't go 3+ as the standard. I think breaching 4 up.
Yeah.
As well as returning to the larger blast markers.
Yeah. Okay.
Also remembering that there are things like skirmish units this edition, you know, and return fire reactions is also a thing. Like again, if that's changing, this might change, but.
Obviously.
Yeah, the other thing just the way that it's usually breaching 6 up this edition or rending 6 up is just pathetic. Like, and on artillery, and artillery is like AP4.
Kind of feels like a waste of time firing it when you're looking for those numbers, right?
Well, I've spoken about it before. Like, when you have artillery this edition, if you fight a Marine, it does nothing. If you fight a Guardsman, you are now King Dick of Fuck Mountain. Because
Guardsman, you're always King Dick of Fuck Mountain.
Well, because you've got the breaching, yes.
Artillery or not.
Sorry, you got the like shell shock or the pinning. But your AP4 is now no longer a hindrance; it's a fucking boon because you're going to ignore all the armor saves now, and the other guy's also going to have
getting cracked open like eggs.
Yeah, they're going to have a lot of infantry. So your weaponry went from being completely useless against the Stardies, despite firing shells the size of fucking Marines' legs. You know, and again, hitting with the power of a fucking heavy bolter, you know, firing around the size of a Marine's finger, to, oh my god, I'm now a god among men when I go up against, you know, Ruinstorm or Auxilia or Militia or half of the Mechanicum range. I just, they don't get saves, and they will get pinned or run away every time. So it's like such a steep, like, cut off there. And yet the points doesn't reflect that, because it's like, should you be paying 160 points for a Medusa this edition against Marines? No. Like, fuck no. But against, like, Soul Rocks, yeah, you need to be paying 160 points. So, yeah. I would also say in the negatives camp, now that I'm thinking about, like, artillery and artillery tactics, obviously we all know about that, vehicles and squadrons. Why are we insisting on squadrons still working the way they did in previous editions, but also tightening the coherency down to the vehicles are more or less like towing each other into battle?
It's fucking ridiculous. Tanks would not be in that close formation to each other.
4 inches coherency. It's disgustingly tight. And
especially with terrain.
Yes. terrain is it makes them really hard to move around and get arcs and line of fire on people. But then being shot by as a vehicle squadron and just having every single hull point that is left over from that first vehicle just move on to his buddy next door has never made sense to me in any edition of the game. Why is it I shoot, let's say I shoot just 3 lascans and they're all shot at a predator. And I'm like, yep, cool. Mm-hmm. They all hit, they penetrate. Oh my first one is it explodes. It dies. And my other 2 shots that were drilled into that same declared target suddenly reflect off the driver's side mirror across into the next vehicle. And now he terrible. Gets shaken or stunned or worse, immobilized, let alone destroyed. And now he's immobilized, and now his squadron mate is sitting there next to him going, so what the fuck do I do?
Like, the worst part is, the smallest, simplest fix to that is that you resolve the hull points allocated against each tank, and then once the hull points have been allocated to each tank, then you roll the damage table for it.
Yeah, I think that's cool. Much better.
You roll 2 explodes on that one tank, the tank's fucking gone.
Well,
it's like, it doesn't then flow on. Yes, if I cause 9 hull points to the squadron, those 9 hull points should be allocated to all the squad members as appropriate. Yeah. Same as infantry, but the results shouldn't flow on if I get an early explodes. Like, my first result in the first one's an explode, it's like, well, I've got to roll the rest, and I got 3 more explodes. Bye-bye, squadron.
I don't think I would keep squadrons the way they are at all. I wouldn't even do that, Darcy. I would change it to squadrons in coherency, get a buff. Otherwise, they're treated like a Dreadnought Talon. You deploy them, they must deploy within 4 inches of one another when you first deploy them, but then they act independently, can all fire at separate targets, do whatever you like throughout the game. But if you bring them into close coherency, they get a buff of some description.
Oh, yeah, that's
like +1 to hit or something like that, right? Because
I would make it that they can go out and in just for simplicity's sake. You choose at the start of the game, yep, they're staying together, or no, they're not. And go from there. And obviously the trade-off is flexibility in movements.
I think maybe because you've got like characters that can jump from squad to squad, unit to unit, like independent characters. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's that different to that. Like, yep, I'm in coherency. Like, I'm moving. I have to physically move them to get them into coherency, right? So I'm going to be firing less weapons probably unless I'm going at like a cruising speed, right?
No, unless you've got ordnance, you pretty much fire everything unless you're going full tilt. And even if you full tilt, you're just snapshotting with the rest. This edition.
Okay, well, I would think of some kind of buff or bonus to them. Maybe the squad gets like the equivalent of like a damage mitigation or something because it's just so imposing having 3 vehicles. I'm not sure what mechanic I would pick, but I think putting them together, they should get a bonus as a... But otherwise, use them independently. You've paid a lot of points for them. Like, there are no... Like, what's the cheapest vehicle? Sabre? And that's still going to set you back about par of 100 points kitted. So...
yeah, 100 if you...
And vehicles are not great, let's be honest.
No.
Like, most aren't great.
Yeah.
Again, part of that is reactions, which somehow a vehicle that's getting charged frontally can't figure out how to... For the guy who's looking out the fucking obvious camera network and hatches can't pull the trigger. And just like spray all of the heavy bolters forwards, but whatever. I mean, you can overwatch the heavy bolters, but it's not worth it. So I would give a boon to vehicles, but otherwise, like, how come dreadnoughts are able to have these super talons where it's bring 3 to 5 contemptors depending on circumstances along, deploy them together, and then go off your own separate ways. There is no wound overflow. There is no must attack the same targets. It's not fair. And these are very equivalent units, I feel, for the amount of firepower they're bringing, the amount of survivability. In fact, the Contemptor has more survivability by a fucking country mile.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, it should just probably operate like that. Because the whole squadron where other tanks in the squadron die out of sympathy, they all change their profile picture to the first tank that died and then they all go down, is fucking stupid.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty silly.
And it discourages tank armies.
Profile picture.
Yeah, well, you've played them though. Like, Randy, you've played tank armies.
Darcy, I played tank armies. Yeah.
Yeah. absolutely.
Like, how
They're fun to
painful is
play,
it
but
to have?
they're fucking they hurt. They're unforgiving. If you have a unlucky turn and the opponent is on the it, I you can lose the game in the first 2 turns with a tank army if
It's
you bring it.
very
The
much
the
feast or famine.
very
If you
sink or swim, isn't it?
yes, it's like truthfully, most games I'm actually all right because most people bring an appropriate amount of anti-tank for a 3K game, and I'm smart again, not to toot my own horn, but I'm smart enough to go, cool, that dies, that dies, that dies,
Yeah.
and then I'm fine. The only game where I've gone, well, I'm fucked, was that game, the doubles game that me and Macca played against Cecil's Iron Warriors. Oh, and Reese's Mechanicum were there as well, but it was mostly Cecil's Iron Warriors fucking us up.
Well, his conversion beamers from across, that was a bad table that Danny put us on, and he was like, "Oh well, that's how the chips lie." It's like, Danny, I'm gonna have to slate him right now in the video. I'm gonna have to record a
just slagging Danny.
Yeah,
no chance to defend himself.
A table which is literally, and Darcy will testify this. There is 3 pieces of terrain on this whole fucking table.
Wasn't it like a fucking?
It was an airfield.
It was a big.
There was a couple of landing pads and an air traffic control tower. So open table.
There was one tiny tree.
Yeah, there was an open table.
Did you hide behind
and we went up against Mechanicum shooting army and an Iron Warriors shooting army, and they had turn 1.
Iron Warriors.
They were given turn 1 by the TO.
The
and we had to like get escort like a character, a single model onto this like landing pad, and it's like in turn 1 with a tank, like 3,000 point armies sharing a 6-foot table. We were clustered up. Our vehicles are all like sponsor to sponsor, right? They start their shooting. Darcy's army was just like pop, 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 pop. I'm just like watching this carnage go down. It's like every like conversion beamer fired across the table. It's like they're all touching each other. So even if they scatter, they're still hitting like 3 vehicles with a strength 10 AP2 shot, right? And whenever a vehicle blew up, that was like strength 8 hits on all the other vehicles around it. Like it was fucking insane. And then like, a vehicle would blow up, the squad would get hit, and then the squad's left in like the cratered ruins, and then a vehicle next to them would blow up, and then the squad gets hit by that explosion. And even as Iron Hands, like they're the toughest vehicle army there is. He was crumped at the end of turn 1. He looked like
you got pumped, ass.
He like turn 1 was he bent over and they put the air traffic control tower and all of its 8-inch girth into him.
Yeah, and look, not to say a terrible game or anything, it was actually really fun.
Heaps of fun.
Heaps of fun from memory. I think we only just lost it because we forgot to move a unit. Otherwise, we would have actually had it. And still, my favorite moment was Reese deep striking his Thalax next to your Venator that had the main gun blown off, but you still had the Dragon's Breath flamers.
Yeah, 3 Dragon's Breath heavy flamers, so I didn't intercept reaction against because you only had like 3 Thalax, so it was just like an insanely and strength 6 because they're Dragon's Breath. Yeah.
So hell, you're having a bad day.
Yeah, fucking hosed him. Because I kitted out my Seeker and Venator with triple Dragon's Breath heavy flamer. So 2 sponsons plus Pintle, and well, you see, that's one of the casualties. So that and my Spartan, both first turn immobilized by the shooting, because it was a Fury of the Ancients Iron Warriors. So strength 10 las cannon dreadnoughts, strength 11 las cannons on the Arachnus las cannons, his box noughts like twin. So 4 shots twingling strength 10 las cannons coming out of each of his box noughts, and he had a talent of 3. So like he's firing that. It's like, Danny, this is almost unwinnable, this scenario. Like they need to roll really, really bad. And he's like, oh no, that's just the way Cookie Crumb. It's like, never do that to
Danny.
me again. Like that's
all because I touched up Danny the night before with my own hands against his death guard.
Yeah,
he was out for vengeance.
Okay. And now the plot thickens.
Yeah, he'll definitely tell you that there was no malice in it, but there was malice, Danny. There was malice. So, and that was after Charles, the Milky Bar kid, honey-dicked fucking Rhino something fierce. So.
Nah, he did it to me. It was me.
Oh, it was you.
Yeah, he did it to me. I hadn't played against Mechanicum in 2.0 yet. And I said, oh, he's like, do you want to have a game? And I said, yeah, yeah. And I was like, how does your list stack up to mine? Like, he goes, oh, no, it'll be a close game. And he just finger banged me in turn 2.
Under the table, sneaky hand.
It was the worst deployment option, worst mission for me. Everything was just not in my. It was the opposite to being in my favor, right? Like everything that could have possibly like been this game was just going against what I bought, and he was running a pretty nasty. We were told no Primarchs, and he bought a Narcissus, Scoria, and yeah, he bought Scoria, and he had he had some nasty shit. It was pretty. We were told 8s, and I would consider what he bought a 10. So.
I beat that list, but that was only because I was playing my Sallies, and I just had, again, Dragon's Breath Heavy Flamers en masse. So that's Mechanicum. It's like, you have a lot of 4-up saves. Okay.
Yeah, nah.
And if you charge me, I'm going to give you a lot of Overwatch.
If I should have taken a photo of the table that we played on too. Like it was, because it was when you deploy in the quarter squares.
Yep.
Yeah.
I had a quarter, but I could barely get my tanks on the ground, so I had to deploy everything really far back and like completely out of line of sight, with the inability to move out of my deployment zone to actually set up some sort of defensive pattern for his basically his attack onto me. So all his Mechanicum stuff had like such better mobility for it, and he had like 2 of those Calyx
yes, what do you call them? Yeah, with their bullcrap precision shot, strength 10 las cannon.
Yeah, man. Every turn, man, those things were collecting.
Yeah, it was amazing because like he was using that against me, and I had Big Barry, my Praetor. For those who know Big Barry, you're gonna get a laugh out of that, right? My Salamander's Praetor, and because he has a big thunder hammer, and
yes, of course,
swinging between his legs, and so Barry has the mantle of the Elder Drake, so he's battle hardened. So it's like I can take a strength 8 or 9 hit and laugh it off with my Dragon's Scale Storm Shield. But when across the table, Charles goes, cool, precision fire from an automaton who's randomly picked my HQ out of the squad, quote unquote randomly, as in Charles saw him, knew it was Big Barry coming to penetrate him with his hammer. So he picked him, and it's like, now make 2 invul saves against a strength 10 las cannon that's being just literally like a laser accurate across the table. So that is not a fun game mechanic. So, but yes, I digress. I should also point out, now that we've mentioned it, and I mentioned Flamers and templates this edition.
Oh my god!
Oh my god!
How good were those Flamers in that ZM game against me, Macca?
So, well, they were Mournival FAQ'd boosted Flamers because they had the pinning rule.
Mm-hmm.
And they had Torrent. Torrent. So, you had how many Terminators left in that squad when I actually flamed you? Like 3?
No, not even. It was literally all it was my Praetor on 2 wounds because I tanked a couple of hits on him before, and the banner bearer for the command squad, Inzo Mortalis.
So, I rock up to this unit, Randy. I have 10 Dragon's Breath Heavy Flamers on a tactical support squad.
Okay? Yep.
Covenant of Fire, Rite of War, they become a scoring troops. They're actually kind of okay, right? But you're paying a lot of points because the tactical support squads are egregiously overpriced.
They're very expensive.
But I had the ability to have a 6-inch torrent, so I could place the template 6 inches in front of my guys. So I hit him with all 10 flamers on all 3 guys. 30 of them. Right? He takes 30 hits at strength 6 from me. No breaching, because it's just flamers.
30 strength 6 hits.
But Terminators have 2 wounds and they're heavy.
Oh, reroll.
How many wounds did you take again, Darcy?
So, also worth throwing out there, I am Iron Hands, so it was -1 strength.
Oh, yeah, true.
However, those 30 wounds inflicted on me, out of those, I only failed 2 in the initial roll. I thought, fuck? I've
Jesus.
just lost my banner for scoring, which was important at that point.
Yeah.
Because the mission we were playing, it's the one where you had to have scoring units in the sector, and you had to have
Oh yeah,
it's
yeah,
either
yeah.
more or only in order to control it, whatever.
Yeah. That's
And
the
I'm
one
like,
where you got to get
fuck.
to their deployment zone, etc.
No, it's one of the ZM missions.
Oh,
Anyway,
okay.
so I'm like, fuck. And then Macca's just like, it was either Macca or me. I went, wait, nope, heavy, because they're cataphracti.
Yeah, I said it
Reroll.
to you
Reroll.
because you were very
Oh,
dejected, and I was
You
like,
didn't take a
yeah.
single wound.
didn't take a single wound.
So
Heavy.
so that's just insane. It's like it just proved how useless the weapon is because even like he did roll that many too. So even like a tactical squad probably would have lived through it. Yeah, they would have been reduced in numbers, but it's like nothing should be living through just that sheer amount of hits, you know. So having like heavy on top of it, and it's like nah, like, and that's as good as flame weapons get this edition.
That was nearly a perfectly ideal scenario. The only thing that would have been better is any other legion, so that was still strength 6 or 7.
It just goes to show you there's no point for any other legion to even take any flamers, right?
Yeah, if Salamanders can't
Pretty
do
much.
it, and that was with boosted Mournival pinning heavy flamers and whatever, then there's no fucking point. They're just so bad. And same as artillery, like a demolisher. Like when was the last time you saw someone bring vindicators that weren't laser destroyers and having a good time?
I played
and
Timmy
having a
with-
good time,
with-
quote unquote.
I played Timmy
having
the
a
other
good
day.
time.
We had a tank battle. Timmy McCheyne, me and him had a tank battle. He had Vindies, and they were flop. He used a Ultramarines tank army against my Iron Warriors one, and it was just those Vindicators are terrible.
The last time that I saw regular Vindicators played against me would have been, it was still in the first year of the new edition. Cam Audi had his 2 or 3 of his Imperial Fist Vindicators, shot them against one of my Contemptors, and between the 3 templates hitting, nothing.
Oh wow!
You know, the funniest thing about it, like something tanking like heavy ordnance this edition, I saw a Contemptor Dreadnought. I played it out with Tim, but I actually saw it in real life. A Contemptor Dreadnought can take an entire Warlord Titan shooting and survive.
Yep.
Really?
It only takes about 3 wounds.
It's,
Yeah, Contemptors are fucked. They're an auto.
Not just that though, it's weapons in general changed.
You can't not have one.
I think I counted it for a video. There's only like 20 weapons that are like AP2 or better this edition. It's something disgusting, like in shooting.
Yeah.
So you just can't hurt anything.
Especially like most people are taking 2 to 3 Contemptors in a 3k point army too.
I also want to touch on actually, Darcy.
Which I'm happy to do it as long as I'm happy to play that as long as I make sure that I'm rolling with that too. You know what I mean? Because if you don't, you come off really poorly.
Yeah.
I want to touch on Darcy, or touch Darcy. Come to my freak offs at the shed.
But I got to sleep.
The Zone Mortalis rules themselves this edition are awful when they could have just literally ported over 1.0s. Would you like to tell the audience, Darcy, how you won your special boy sash?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
So hold on, let me just pick it up from my desk. And just put it on.
The victory sash.
So the sash, for those that may or may not know, says I am the 2024 Eye of Horus Con Zone Mortalis World Title Kumite winner. However, to win this glorious victory,
I was a piece of shit.
I was not a piece of shit. So the Kumite, the way it worked was, in order to progress in the Kumite, you had to make sure your warlord survived. If you killed the enemy's warlord, then you automatically went through, even if you lost your game. If either both warlords survived or both died, then it was based on the game results. Now, every round, to the 4th round, I killed the enemy warlord and won my games. For the 4th round, I was up against, I forget his name, I'm terrible with names, but he was Imperial Fists, running Stone Gauntlet with the Solar Marshal Praetor and the Huskarl Terminators. So, real friendly list.
It's a good list for a zone, yeah.
An insane fucking list for zone, but yes. Like, literally cannot get harder for Zone Mortalis, but yes, continue.
Yep. Yes. And again, not saying I was running weak shit. I was running Terminators and Breaches and Contemptor and all that shit. So, the mission we rolled was, I forget the name of it, but it's where there's 6 objectives, and it's a progressive scoring mission where every objective you hold, you score at the end of the turn. The tables we're also playing on were, there are either 4x4s or it was a 5x4. So it was a fairly large table. And because we were playing on Tim's actual ZM tiles in a random layout, it was quite a snaky path to get around. And bear in mind, most ZM missions either end turn 4 or potentially go to a turn 5. So for this mission, he only had 2 scoring units, I had 3. So I was going to outscore him, and he would only win on secondaries. Now, also, this is part of a campaign weekend, and both actually on the loyal side, just how the Kumite bracket worked out. So we made a gentleman's agreement. Our armies won't fight for each other because it makes no sense. We're both on the loyalist cause. All we care about is the Kumite title. So my warlord had to stick on an objective to score points because we want to do well because he's in the command squad and we want to do the most for our side. But the rest of our armies won't fight each other. Your warlord's unit will attack my warlord's unit, and we'll settle the title that way.
Yeah.
Turn 1, he moves. I do nothing. Turn 2, he moves the warlord's unit. Turn 3 again, he's getting close. He's only about maybe 16 inches away. Get to turn 4, he ends up being like, I think 11 inches away just because of how the fucking hallways and that go. And it's like, right, turn 4, we gotta roll to see if there's a turn 5. Anything but oh hey, I rolled a 1, game over. I win. And just shook his hand right there, and that's how I became the world champion.
Yep. So both players just sat on objectives, and because one player had more scoring units and therefore could sit on more objectives, because of the walls blocking everything, and zone's always a game that needed like a full 6 turns. Just because the way you had to like bring things on and move through the corridors is never a straight line anywhere. So he literally, not a single shot was fired, and Darcy did not move a single model. It's the only thing that happened in the whole game. A riveting, well-written game by Games Workshop right here. All that happened was Old Matey moved these Huskarls and Praetor each turn, and the only dice rolled was to see who went first and to see if the game ended. 2 dice rolls in the entire fucking game.
That's the World Champ difference, baby.
and the thing is, right, if you hadn't sat on the objective, if you'd gone out to meet him, it basically would be the same result, just there might be a Slay the Warlord in there, and it would have been a tie on points. So, and I don't say there won't maybe be a Slay the Warlord. He would have won on that.
There is no true tactical acumen in that, right?
Yeah,
like it's just...
So he became the champion by default. And we made him wear the satchel weekend. We made him wear the satchel weekend, but it was the sash of shame at that point.
I felt no shame that weekend.
I'm proud of you, Darcy. I support it.
It was like when Randy and I went back to the B&B for like at lunchtime. We were like, "Oh, let's just go back and grab some stuff." And we like went, "Oh, it was stinking fucking hot." Like what 36 degrees or something, 40 degrees.
Oh man, it was a warm day,
and there was not that great an aircon at the venue. So we're like, let's just have a quick...
Funk.
I think it was you that suggested it, Randy. Like, we should have a quick swim. And then we got in there, we should have a fucking beer as well. And it was like an hour or 2 later, we're like...
No, way longer than that. We didn't get back there till 5 o'clock.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we only went... And the only reason we went
that's
back
right. I was drinking a lot.
Lift.
So I don't really keep track of the time super well when I'm drinking a lot. And like those hard solos...
We had to give them a lift.
I was on those hard solos as well, which are like... hot, sunny day, hard solo in the water. Yeah, hard solo for the drink, like lemon squash with fucking high alcohol content.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so sitting there in the pool like a fat piece of shit, just like drinking these things until we get to the point where you got to like piss and you go to like get out of the pool and you're like walking up the steps and you realize your legs don't function properly anymore. I was sort of in that sort of stage for a good like hour.
Yeah. Look, you may have made me feel a little bit bad about the sash if Brian Stevenson hadn't won one of the coolest dude awards after me.
Yeah.
We were fucking.
We were fucking with him.
Rhino. It was me and Rhino. We got that.
That's right. Both of you got it.
Yeah, the two Ryans.
Because it was done by peer voting. Because it was done by peer voting, we were telling them like, "Oh, we're just gonna like vote for you anyway, so you win by default." And you never know if people actually thought you were a cool dude or if they did just to fuck with you. So, and then they won the award. So,
me and Rhino, we're both looking at each other like, "Oh god."
Yeah, did we just get stitched up and they hate us, or did they actually think we were the most fun to play against all the time? Fuck yes. So yeah, so this goes to show that we did have a lot of fun playing in events at 2.0. Like, it's not that you can't have fun in the edition, but yeah, there's a lot of bad mechanics. So we've covered templates, we've covered values, we've covered weapon skill charts. What else do we think is...
One of my hot takes is I think turning all Terminators into 2 wound models, terrible decision for the health of the game.
I think it's good that they did. I think stacking multiple bonuses on that, like heavy as well, where it's like re-rolling armor saves and then giving them weapons that just annihilate whatever the fuck they touch. It's a combination. Like it's the same as artillery, right? Like artillery got smaller blasts, it got worse AP, units got larger coherencies, units got boosted saves, units got additional wounds. Like 5 things at once happened to nerf artillery that the developers never took into account. Same thing with Terminators. They were on the other end of that spectrum where it was like they get like 5 buffs. So it's not the 2 wounds. I like the 2 wounds on Terminators. What I don't like is everything that went on around the 2 wounds.
Oh, okay.
For me, my issue with the 2 wounds is that it skewed the choices for melee weapons, because it's not just the Legion Terminators onto 2 wounds. It's now that all special Terminator units are also 2 wounds. And on top of that, a lot of the Legion specialist units are also 2 wounds, even if they're not necessarily Terminators, because they're roughly, it's like their Terminator equivalent, essentially. So stuff like your suzerains and all that, it was the cork in the bottle that got let out. So it went from like, okay, Paraxes have a genuine niche in that they're your cheaper basic option on, say, Terminators. But it's still worthwhile because most Terminators you go into, they win slightly worse than Power Fist, but still got the AP2 that you need. And like, yeah, if you run into Justarian or Fire Drakes, you're gonna wish that you had the Power Fist, but it's what it is. And also in terms of shooting, you had the plasma guns, which were strength 7, so they went instant death, but they were more shots, so you're more likely to get you had more attacks, get more wounds, to hopefully inflict more casualties on the Terminators when in rapid fire range. By jumping up to 2 wounds, suddenly you've made Melter Gun the clear, obvious pick for combi weapons, for example, because they instant death the Terminators. Las Cannons, same thing, instant death the Terminators. So, incentivized higher strength weaponry, where strength 7, don't really give a fuck, it's not instant death and stuff I needed to kill. Then for melee, same thing. It's like, well, why would I take a power axe for 5 or 10 points more? I take the power fist, and I can actually kill what my Terminators need to go into, which is usually other Terminators. Thunderhammer's become much more better, because not only are they instant death,
get the 2 opportunities to do the 2 wounds.
Yes, and that's brutal as a separate thing, where I don't hate brutal as a wound, but where it's been applied to and the weapons it's been applied to, terrible choice.
I'm showing on screen for some reference, by the way. I'm showing the Legion Command Squad in their lovely Mark 6 armor. Sucks. But who are all come by default in plastic with power swords. That's like... I know there are people out there who are going to be like, I always take power swords, Macca. Yeah, fuck off. Nobody's taking power swords this edition, except people who, are just... There are always going to be people who buck trends, right? Because they think something's cool. I get it. I get it. So when I say nobody's taking them, I know some people are. Don't sit there in the comments going, but Macca, I like power. So I don't give a shit. Right? I could not give less fucks. Behold thy field of fucks, 'tis barren. What I care about is nobody is taking power swords, power axes. Barely anyone takes lightning claws because it's just power swords, but smidgen better. The only one I see realistically is mauls. Because
mauls are the best power weapon. Or spears. Spears are also quite good.
Yeah, spears are really good.
Spears are good.
I like spears.
But I didn't see a lot of people taking them. Mauls, I see a lot more of. Because, like, against power armor especially, like, king shit, right? 2s to wound.
Yep.
Like, ignoring armor saves, great.
Crack on, son.
But, like, Terminators come by default with power weapon. It's not even a point bringing it by default. Nobody takes it. Right? Yep. Unless it's a unit, like even Gorgons, which are more of a shooty Terminator unit. More in fact, I would just say just resilient Terminator unit. That's their thing.
They're a tar pit Terminator unit.
Yeah.
Great for tar pit and chaff.
They're coming with like power axes, right? But like in general, nobody takes power swords and power weapons because they all universally suck. Because the game has flanderized. Well, the game has flanderized.
Then you come with them.
Yeah, the game has flanderized itself though into a point where it's like, okay, you've introduced all these individual profiles for power weapons, but frankly, they're not needed because it's either it ignores marine saves or it instant deaths Terminators. And if it's not one of those two niches, it doesn't exist in the game, you know? Like, the only weapons that fall outside of that is like Paragon Blades. Or something in that category, you know?
Or like your, I don't mind the enchantable weapons, they go alright.
Enchantable weapons are quite nice.
Yeah, I like the breaching on them and that. The low level, like you can breach on the 4s or whatever it is.
That's like the only weapon that's doing something different. So as I said, in the Outer Circle version of the game, if we were to make one, right, which again we've discussed at length many of these problems in the past. It's what we do. Is I would just get rid of all the profiles for power weapons and just re-homogenize them because it doesn't really matter at the end of the day if you're going to keep a lot of the changes.
Make it a power weapon and it's
just ignores armor saves. Just make them ignore armor saves. Right? No strength bonuses, no fucking damage buffs. It's just ignore Terminator armor and power armor, right? But it's at user strength, like
user strength and still get invols.
Yeah, you could make an exemption maybe for like power spears or something, but the problem with doing that is then it like takes away from the Emperor's Children's unique spear, and then it's going to become a case of, well, if it's just called a power weapon and it's the same points as everything else, people will just default to it. If it's got a buff, so no.
Not just that. It also gives a lot of the Legion specific weapons their room to carve out their own niche. Because right now, a lot of them are just like, oh, it's a power spear with something else, or it's a shittier power sword, etc., etc.
Yep.
Whereas, like you said, okay, you can have a generic power weapon which you model as a spear, or the Emperor's Children power spear actually does, it gives you that, it gives you reach or whatever. In addition to...
Yeah, I fully agree. I'm also going to add another one in here on my negatives, which is because of the way they've made the game so weapon skill 5, strength 8 heavy across the board. It's just such, like, even if you're playing against Mechanicum, it's good to have strength 8 weapons. Even if you're playing against Mechanicum, it's good to have weapon skill 5. You're playing against Custodes, you definitely need weapon skill 5 because you just will not hit them in close combat if you don't. Weapon skill 5, strength 8, they're the two like prerequisites of any good unit in 2.0. And when I look at infantry, the game has like, you never see despoilers get taken, not just because they never had good upgrades except for the expensive as fuck Forge World ones where you're paying like 400 Australian dollars for a 20 man. It's basically just assault marines because they get there fast with apothecaries and can do a lot of attacks, or it's basic tactical squads. You never see or recon marines because they got sniper rifles. You don't see the scout squad. Because why take those when you can take power armor? It's just a no-brainer. There's like so minimal. It's like a 5-point difference between the two squads. Like, okay, I'll take the one with the better save.
The also recon scoring, whereas the Scout Squad isn't.
I know, it's fucking stupid. And the Recon Squad is also better for the Recon Rite of War. So, but anyway, you don't see tactical support anymore. It's very rare, because they're so expensive and they're not scoring.
Yeah, I don't get that. I do not understand why they're not line. I think that'd be a change for me. I'd be making them line.
Well, not just that they're not line. It's
fuck line off.
Yep.
That was a terrible mistake.
If it's
terrible
troops,
rule.
it's scoring.
Line should be a rule that elite units can earn or come with as a part of their special.
We had it last edition.
I know.
It was there.
I know.
It was good because, just.
Yep. So really, and you never see breaches anymore, because why would you take breaches? What do they actually do? Because the things you would take breaches for, like, oh, they're really good against blasts and templates and stuff last edition, not a problem this edition. Infantry are not utilized. Like last edition, my rule of thumb was 2 infantry choices in your first 1,000 points, plus a dreadnought, probably a Terminator unit, and something anti-tank was generally my starting guide. And I'd say for every 500 points you go up, try and add something that can score.
Another troops choice, yeah.
Another troops choice or implacable advance or something, right? Was my advice in 1.0. In 2.0, most missions are kill points. If they're not kill points, they're Cathonia, therefore they're short and shitty. And
I don't the missions. Oh, which brings us to the next point. The missions in 2.0 are fucking terrible when you compare them to 1.0.
Yeah, give us one more sec on the infantry before I move on to the missions.
Sorry, Maka.
So, but because of that, it means that now all this variety and spice in the game system is just gone, because people are taking troops as a troops tax. They take the bare minimum squad size they can get away with just to have something, and scoring is rarely an issue. Where I was like, fuck, if only I had more tactical Marines. Never come up in 2.0. Because games are just so often decided by the elite stuff, which sucks. It really sucks this edition. Because if you can throw 3 dreadnoughts up someone's throat, chances are they're going to have a hard time taking down 3 contemptors. So your game's going to be a cakewalk, and no amount of tactical squads is going to fix that problem. So infantry, just in general, this edition, I don't see seekers. I rarely see veterans. It's pretty much just tactical squads, assault squads, the occasional recon squad if people want to take Nemesis bolt weapons, which I think the community sort of universally agreed are what should I say? Cancer? Probably. And Legion heavy support squads, typically with las cannons, because another bad thing, Sunder on las cannons, where it's they're just with so many 2-wound units.
They do not need that.
There's so many 2-wound units out there. People took las cannons anyway. It was going to happen, but being cheaper this edition to take 10 las cannons than 10 fucking plasma gun tactical support marines. It's what the fuck is going on? And it just means that now armies are so much less interesting, because it used to be you go to an event and you'd see 3 or 4 cool troops choices, often with transports. And that added a lot of what was cool, the rule of cool factor in an event. And it's not because people are trying to be power gaming, but people are fuck, if I'm going to spend the money on an army and I want to play this army and I want to try and be competitive, I'm not going to invest all these points in troops and transports that I'm just handing away kill points and shit. It's not worth it this edition. And it's a real shame, because armies have shrunk in size. Used to be that, there'd be a 4-foot wide display. Your army would be stretched out over 4 feet long on the table, a foot deep, and you get these awesome photos at the event. And that would be at 2K. Now, an army doesn't even take up that much space at 3K unless it's a tank-heavy one. Shit's shrunk, and it's a shame. And it's because of, in part, the missions, but mostly war gear and meta shift. But yeah, missions, to get into that point, Randy.
Yeah, that's part of it. I think as well, we've had a lot of new people on the scene, and most of the new people got in because of Plastic Heresy, and are mostly stuck with Plastic Heresy. And that sort of feeds into the whole what your local meta is and consists of, which incentivizes that more focusing on heavy support squads, elite troops, some of the better vehicles, so Scorpius, Spartans and or Land Raiders as transports, but not a ton of them, etc., etc. And they not everyone was branching out into a lot of the kits that were either mostly resin or you'd have to print your own upgrades, etc. So that's part of it. I think as the edition's gone on, at least locally, I noticed after the Solar Auxiliary came to plastic, about 6 months later, we've seen an uptick in solar players, and it's not just people running like nothing but vanquishers or whatever. Fair bit of infantry in there. And also since stuff like jet bikes have been released in plastic, there's a bit more variety to the armies. So I think that's something that, as we got more plastic kits and more people that are only really comfortable with plastic kits have more variety, it's something that may change. But, I think
it doesn't help though.
Plastic
Darcy
is definitely helpful to. Like even for me, I prefer plastic because I just for the fact of doing conversions with plastic is so much nicer because you're fusing stuff together, right? And it's when it snaps, you can cut a slice off and you can refuse it. Whereas like if you're building something, let's say you want to scratch build your own custom tech marine using little resin pieces and you got to pin everything and it's always breaking off in your case. Oh, I love plastic compared to resin, but
there's
I'm
a
still
trade-off there.
I'm still comfortable to work with resin. So
the big trade-off I have with a lot of the plastic kits is they never release a full range. They just give you they get you to first base.
Yeah.
And you got a range like solar, and there's so much stuff even now that's gated away behind resin that's like it's useful or it's fun. Okay, I get it. The flamer support squads are not going to be great this edition, but rapiers, they're locked away behind resin, and they don't even have all of the types of rapier available to Solar Ogs, like what they have rules wise versus what they can actually build. Like you got quad mortars, and they're like the Krieg ones. I don't think they have an actual solar quad mortar. The Marines have, but Solar don't. They've got a multi-laser, but they don't have a laser destroyer. So, which sucks because that's the one you want. They don't have Charonite Ogrons either.
Nope.
And of course, so again, if you want variety, like you've got to give, and if you're playing Mechanicum, well, cool, you've got Tech Thralls, you've got Castellax, you've got one type of Thanatar, you've got the Triaros, which no one gives a shit about because transport vehicles and starter boxes are trash. You've got Thalax, and you've got a single type of Magos, which is even crazier than not having a multi-pose, multi-build Astartes model. Why don't you have a multi-build fucking Mechanica Magos when those bastards are armed with fucking every different flavor under the sun? They're the Willy Wonka chocolate factory of, character customization.
Yeah.
Big bodies, little bodies, Abeyant, no Abeyant, Mechandrites, fucking cyber familiars, like all the different hats that they can wear, right? Pope hat, Jewish hat, Hanukkah, whatever, like tiny hat, but choices, Indian headdress with the fucking feathers, whatever, fucking floats your boat, right? They got it all. And yet the model was like you get a single monopose Magos like a Volkite Serpenta. It's like, ooh, so close. Yeah, and they honey dick you. It's the same as like you want to play Sisters of Silence. Well, we have bolt guns, we have swords, we have Janisha Kroll, and if you want, you can buy the Resin 2 bolt pistols upgrade set. That is it for an army which has... Oh, sorry, and there is the Red October standing by. That's it. There's no... They've got jet bikes, no models. They've got a heavy support squad, no models. They've got fucking squads that run around with like cyber mastiffs, cyber eagles and stuff, no models. They've got fucking elite choices with like needle guns and stuff, no models. HQ options and command squads, no models. Just like, so why, like, it's cool they got rules, even if they came like a year into the Heresy, but you can't build it. You are forced into 3D printing and third-party proxies, and people don't want that. I've noticed it is not a thing people want to be forced into. They want the option of being able to go with 3D prints and other manufacturing ideas. They want the option. They don't want to be forced. That's the big difference. Like I'm happy to use third-party shoulder pads, but I don't want to feel like I must because Games Workshop's they're not filling the niche, right?
Well, it's the same thing for me. Like I'm in the process of building the Phalanx Waters for my Imperial Fists, and I've got the 20 plastic Mark III box. But for me, because I don't want to run Phalanx Waters, because now when you put them next to a Mark VI or a Mark III Space Marine, they look like children. So now I'm going and
They look
buying the
like you
Mark
next
III
to
kit and
normal
then
people.
3D printed. Well, so I buy the Mark III plastic kit, and then I'm basically 3D printing a shield arm with a shield, upscaling it. It suits the Mark III, and I've already done a test print, and it looks with the Sergeant, it looks bloody awesome, and it makes them more imposing. But so why not just let's that's another thing they could have been doing as well. They could have been bringing out upscaling all the special stuff as well.
The
That's another thing
scale
they could
creep
easily
this
do.
edition is just rough. I still kills me that they haven't done breaches yet. Like boarding shields would sell again if they're in plastic. People would probably be more inclined to buy them.
Oh yeah,
Like
people would be
Fafnir Rand
using them to make
exists.
their special units. I would have bought them.
They've got the shield STL already. Like the CAD design exists. Fafnir Rand's wearing it for their new Cyber Shield because they won't re-release the old, really nice looking shields. It'll have to be the new Marine with that shitty trim that always has the slots in it that they use on everything now. But I digress. The missions. We touched on it with Zone Mortalis being badly written, but core missions. We had. So I was counting, and I did this, right? For Heresy 1, every book gave us a minimum of 6 new missions.
Mm-hmm.
With different deployments, different objectives, different secondary objectives, different campaign rules, and some, like book 3, I'm going to say it was, gave us, I think it was 6 alternate ways to play each mission. Where it was like you'd have aggressors, you could have defenders, you could have additional fortification options, like just really cool gimmicks like that, right? Whereas like you could play like a mission on a table, and then it was like the terrain got destroyed. It went like, now next time you play on the table, it's like instead of it being like a 4-story tall building, now it's just like a crater where it was. And you're essentially like, fighting over the ruins, whatever it might be. Relic missions where it was like you have to capture and seize an object that you can actually physically move around. The other person now trying to catch it and get it off you, right? All of that existed in the previous edition. And objective scoring was a huge part of it.
Objectives especially, yeah.
What's the breakdown of the games you guys tend to play this edition?
For the most part... Right, so most pickup games have been standard rulebook missions, mostly because at events that don't do custom missions, they typically do the Cathonia missions. That's just sort of how it's worked out. Or if they do custom missions, they're in the style of Cathonia missions, which, it's just how they've done it.
Yeah.
And also, again, I mentioned this towards the start of the episode. I've been doing a Slow Grow League recently, and there's a couple of new people. And generally, the rulebook missions are a lot more simple and straightforward to do for a new person. And it's less, because most of the scoring, with the exception of one of them, is all just what are you holding at the end of the game. It keeps the strategy for them very simple, so they can focus on learning the core rules. And then, after a couple of weeks or whatever, then it's like, oh, do you want to play a Cathonia game? There's a bit more to think about, or think about in a different way. So that's just sort of how it works out. And then straight up custom missions or missions from last edition, maybe 10% of what I've played in 2.0.
Yeah, mostly custom. So most events we go to, it's custom missions, pickup game. Even my monthly gaming group here in Brisbane, the Bris 30K ones are almost exclusively custom missions, or they're like they're mashups of missions. So making like one of the rulebook missions, but you add in an objective component to it. I find that's quite good.
Mm-hmm.
The book missions by themselves just tend to be like, if you're just going to go play your book missions, you need to really you're going to try and bring stuff that kills stuff, right? There's not much thought process goes into playing the missions in the rulebook, and the campaign missions, especially the four turn objective ones, are terrible. Yeah, not my thing. Not my jam.
I know there are a lot of defenders. There are a lot of defenders of the Chthonian missions because they're more objective, but they're quick. Again, designed for the simpleton. Like 4 turns is not enough.
A lot of people play them, the simpletons.
Yeah, the 4 turns is not enough. It's by any objective measure, it's not enough to play the game in decisively, especially at big points. Subjectively, you can have a lot of fun in those 4 turns. But the problem is if you're playing something like Mariskara, where you come on later in the game, and you've got something like progressive scoring, congratulations, you've lost the game. Because you cannot come on and kill enough stuff and now hold enough objectives to claw back the points that you've lost in the progressive scoring. So it kills gameplay. And that's how I won against Cantrell's army, against Mike from Eye of Horus. We played a game. He was playing his Mariskara. I had my Salamanders, so I just went turn 1, cool, 3 squads onto 3 objectives. Tick, there's a point on the progressive scoring. Oh, you've only got 2, Michael. Well, tick, there's, and all right, I'm ahead by a point. Then I kill him off of an objective in turn 2. All right, now I'm getting 3 a turn, he's getting 1. Oh, then I kill his other squad off the objective in turn 3. Now I'm getting 3 a turn. So by turn 3, when his Mariskara arrives on the board, he's now got to fight after coming on his table edge, and because you have to mark where they're coming on with an icon, he now has to fight through my Fire Drakes and Barry to get to my troops who are holding objectives. So I don't care if I lose Barry and the Fire Drakes. I am willing to put all my Land Raiders there in a line and make you fight through hulls, and I'm willing to let you try and, good luck, fight your way through Fire Drakes. The Phoenix Terminators is not happening. And it did not.
Not in that amount of time.
No.
Not unless he gets exceptionally lucky with instant deaths.
He had a chaplain in there. He had a champion, and Barry 3, because he shot me a lot. 3 Fire Drakes, Barry, and a champion just devastated him. They just tore him a new one. It didn't matter that he had a Phoenix Spear and all that. I just went, cool, advanced reaction Salamanders. I go up by 1 weapon skill. I'm now... it really blunts the Emperor's Children charge. Again, reaction, get out of jail free card for idiots, and there's no thought process in there. It's like, cool, my Praetor's like Web 7 now, even with your negative modifiers and stuff. Oh, look, I'm ignore fear 1 as well, and all that kind of stuff because of the Forgecraft and the Nocturne Warlord trait. Anyway, the point of what I was getting at was like, cool, an army like that just has no hope. So the Chthonian missions are very much a quick game for people who want to play a very traditional game, which is like, well, why are we playing Horus Heresy? Go play 40k if you want that. Like Heresy, you've got all these warlord traits, you've got all these rights of war, all these diverse and interesting factions, even though people think it's a marine-only game. There's Custodes, there's Sisters, there's Ruinstorm, there's Knights, there's Mechanicum that comes in its own set of flavors, there's Militia, there's Auxilia. Like, there's a lot of stuff you can play if you choose to. And people don't want to take it because the missions are so constrained. Why would you? I mean, and again, like, you can get away with taking a list that shouldn't perform, like a Militia Lehman Russ of like 3rd line Lehman Russes, and know that, hey, even at 2,000, 3,000 points, I stand a good chance at winning because I only need like 3 20-point, or whatever they are, like 50-point basic bitch squads just to sit on the occasional objective, and the Lehman Russes with Vanquishers can do the rest.
Yeah.
It's fucking amazing. The mission design is just so terrible when there is a good, 100 missions from 1.0? Roughly. 6 per book over 10 books, plus the 6 different ways of playing that were introduced in book 3. So there
were so many awesome missions in
even excluding those. Yeah, even excluding the book 3 other ways to play, that's still 60 missions.
I would have just taken the missions that they already had, and I would have converted them over to so that they work with the new edition.
And that's all they had to do. Yep. And why couldn't they? Because the writers are not I don't know what's the writers and what's management. This is the problem, right? When I get aggressive and angry, I don't know who made the call, but it was a bad call, right? I'm assuming it's the writers sniffing their own farts because I've seen how some of these writers respond when people have probed them for questions.
Yep.
And it's very much a why did you do this? And the answers you get from some of these writers, you just sit there and go, wow, holy fuck, you're more out of touch with reality than a Kardashian. You've seen it, Darcy.
I certainly have. It's just a shame. But the other thing as well, because I know there's one local guy, Bailey, who did, funnily enough, come from 40k, who does like the Cathonia missions. It's mostly because they're progressive scoring. Because he prefers, again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but to him, progressive scoring is a more fair sort of system where it sort of encourages you to actually be scoring. Whether or not that's how most Cathonia games actually sort of go out, and whether or not that's the actual consequence of it, it's a bit here or there. And I get that. My problem with Cathonia, if Cathonia was just Cathonia missions, plus the Apex missions, which are the campaign unique ones, quote unquote, it'd be fine. It's like, cool, it's another mission set we can pull out for a rainy day. My issue is we had for this edition 4 campaign books. 4. Now, 3 of them have had Cathonia reprinted in them. Only one other campaign book has another mission set to it, and that's the Mechanicum one with the relic missions. The only from memory Beta Garmin had fuck all else outside of the Apex missions, which are themed to that and not necessarily balanced around sort of pickup games. They're more for like, here's the culmination for the campaign, like some of the original Heresy 1.0 campaign books are.
It's also worth pointing out, though, those Apex missions, there's not a lot of them.
No, it's like
between 1 and
book.
3. It's between 1 and 3. I think the most was 3, and that might have been Cathonia. It's either 2 or 3. So it's not a lot of missions. Again, which 1.0, the 6 missions you get are for a campaign of 6 missions. Like, it's actually like, oh, a campaign book is exactly that. It's a campaign book. A campaign book this edition is 1 mission to 2, maybe 3. And that's your campaign book. The rest are, as you said, reprints.
The other thing for me, and it's actually something that Heresy Hammer annoys me every time they say it, is they give heaps and heaps of praise to Beta Garmin because it's like, oh, a brand new campaign system they added in. But it's not. It's literally the same campaign system they've been using, which is the Onslaught campaign system that Cathonia introduced. All Beta Garmin did was add some extra add-ons to it, like they said they was going to do. Which, again, I don't mind, but you got to remember the Heresy Black books that came out, which at their peak they were doing what 9 months between books 2 and 3, Maka?
No, 6 months at the peak. So in the period from like August 2013 through to like August 2014, we got like 4 books in like that 2-year period. We had books 2 through to 5, and then it slowed down. It went to a year again from book 5, so the Ultramarines book, through to book 6, which was the Shattered Legions Black Shields book. And then it was another year until Prospero. Then it was 2 years to the next book, and then 2 years to the book after that.
So let's be generous and say on average, 1 black book a year, right? Every campaign book that came out had its own campaign system. Most of them were specialized to the campaign fighting over. However, book 4 and book 6 were both generic campaign systems you could use that weren't themed to a theater. So that was I can't remember what book 4's one was called, but that campaign system, which had
I think it was the Conquest system. I think
Conquest. Yeah, it could be that, but it had so many things. It had character progression, like a million different things, right?
Yeah, improving stat lines, improving special rules on characters. Like it was more RPG elements to it.
It was endless.
Yeah,
there was so much
shit in
stuff.
it. Book 6 has the was themed around the Shadow Wars, and it was a much different sort of scope of battle. It was much more not necessarily hit and run, but it wasn't like two armies lining up and just slugging each other out. There was a bit of cat and mouse to it, right? At least that was the idea behind them. It wasn't necessarily execution, right? But every book had a unique campaign system with 6 missions plus campaign-specific missions. These these campaign books that they've done for 2.0, I'm sure they've done it every 6 months, give or take, but the first one, Cathonia, was probably their strongest one, which is unfortunately because I remember might have been the Festivus stream 2 years ago or something, Macca. We said I remember saying, look, I'm not particularly impressed by Cathonia, but I think if they can build and improve upon it, we might have something here.
Yeah.
And they haven't. Yeah. We had Legacies of the Age of Darkness Volume 1, which was pretty much nothing but reprints. Tiny.
A single mission and a single unit. And that was the Salamander's Adherents and the and a mission involving them.
Like, plus the Heretic stuff, which that wasn't, however much effort they put in, it doesn't show. Now, then we go to Beta Garmin, which no new missions outside of the Apex missions. Like, no new campaign system. There was add-ons, but it is what it is. Whatever. 6 months later, we get Mars. Again, a bunch of reprinted stuff from PDFs that were already out there. There was some extra stuff for Mechanicum. There was a couple of Techno Arcanas and a couple of Warlord traits that did change some things. But in terms of campaign system, it's still the Onslaught campaign system. You did get 5 extra missions, I believe. Might have been 4 or 5 for the Relic Hunt missions. And then a couple extra stratagems for the Onslaught campaign system, which again, Beta Garmin also did. Yeah. Not bad if this was all done in a 12-month period. But 2.5 years of Heresy, I gotta say, it's a bit of a piss poor effort.
Yeah.
Well, especially considering
we already knew that, though.
Every book's also like 100 pages down on content, and because I did that obviously a video where I compared how many units are being introduced, how many new mechanics are being introduced, how many missions, all that. It's like it's just so pathetic. it's the only word to describe it. I didn't even compare it to like the later campaigns of book 1, Heresy 1, because Heresy 1 kept up. Like the only book that was like underwhelming was book 9. Everything up to that point was really, really like, okay, there were errors and flaws in some, don't get me wrong. Like, you know, the Thousand Suns book made people die inside a little at times. But until book 9, where it was like, you could tell that one was phoned in. And you know what? Book 9 was the same creative team behind 2.0, and it fucking shows.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, there's no reason why they couldn't have put Dark Mechanicum in that book. It is the size of a 2.0 book. And it shows. It didn't have any of the love or passion. But, you know, like, Anuj got to make the Kratos tank, so, you know, I'm thankful that piece of shit exists. It's got a fucking higher kill count than Isis, but whatever. Fucking... fuck that piece of shit. It does not belong in the game. It looks awful, and it's a piece of shit. It's a piece of shit. Get rid of that fucking crap from my game. That is a fucking edgelord. You know what it is? It's the fucking Maul Ninja of tanks. This is how I'm going to end this episode. Fuck the Kratos, right? It is like a fucking edgy teenager who watched The Matrix, Dark City, and The Crow, and he goes out and he buys cool swords that are fucking shaped like Frostmourne for his fucking ninja collection, and he has photos of himself like in his fucking trench coat and a fedora, fucking holding it up like Blade. That fucking dude, the fucking Kratos appeals to him. Fuck that tank.
Doesn't Timmy like Kratos's as well?
Tim loves Kratos.
And
they're great in the game. They're good in the game.
I wouldn't go that far.
I wouldn't go that far.
Pretty shit.
I've every time I've ran mine with the melters and the las cannons, man, it's fucking chopped.
Look, they can perform. Anything can perform.
I've had good experiences with mine. But they're Iron Warriors as well.
Randy confirmed for Fedora.
They're strength 10 las cannons and.
Randy, I think this says a lot more about you than it says about the Kratos.
Yeah, no, that tank looks nothing like other Astartes tank. It's got so much try hard, and yet for me, it did not land. You know,
but if it just didn't have that weird deck where it's got the front hull swivel, if you got rid of that, I think it'd be a lot better.
the two commander cockpits, like the officer's latrine next to the fucking driver's position. It's like, why would you do that? Like, if you have a tank, you'd be like, just common sense says like, unless I have something that I need to put there, like a weapon system or a comm system or something, why would you not? Like, look at every other tank in 40k and 30k. They're all like flush level front. The only tank that has like an offset hull to the side or whatever is like the Sicaran and the Aquator. Everything else is like, if it's got a central like hull, right, and it's got an offset driver's position, it just has the hull just continues flat across to the other side, like on a Rhino, on like a Melkador and Macarius.
Fellblade,
Felsion, Baneblade, like all those variants. And there's a weapon mounted there. That's like, why don't you take the two fucking guns off those two little like fucking shoulders, move them down, and put them there? So it looks like all the other tanks do. Oh no, we couldn't do that. And it's got like the like lopsided turret where it's like the only other vehicle in the Heresy ever, or it fucking Marines and Imperium that has a lopsided turret is the Sicaran Punisher, which everyone agrees the gun does not look great on that.
I feel like Macca's head's about to pop off his shoulders, Dust?
Nah, hey, look, if you want to pop it off, we'll talk about the only thing that is like hurting me still is that people like that Iron Warriors Praetor's fucking hammer, and you
leave that stoplight alone.
That thing is a royal piece of shit.
I did the Photoshop of like the smaller version of that, the smaller and better looking version of that, and that like people were. See if I can fucking pull that shit up. And yet people were like, no, that hammerhead looks way too small on that fucking model. It's like, no, that hammerhead is still huge.
No.
It is, I'm putting it up in the video right now. That hammerhead is still fucking huge. It's just, it doesn't look it because it's a Terminator. But I guarantee if you held it in your hands, you'd be like, yeah, no, that is actually really proportional. And people are like, it looks way too small. He's a Terminator. Terminators have to swing heavy hammers. Like, look, the fucking hammerhead on the official model is bigger than the like Perturabo's hammer. Like it makes no sense. It's so bad. It's so fucking bad.
But Macca, the Kratos is simply the car of tomorrow designed by Homer Simpson.
It is.
In Heresy.
It's introducing the Kratos. It's hideous.
Oh god, you ruined me.
that Iron Warriors Praetor, I love that model, and I'm gonna design the smaller Graviton more to put on that model specifically. But the fucking big,
I want the two-handed version where he's holding it with two hands.
Well, you got to go to Warhammer World for that exclusive, buddy. Do you live near the UK? No. Well, you can get a fucked. That's no, because I had this problem back when like the Pravian.
There's always recast.
You remember Narek Draeger? Yep, yeah, when it was like the only, and I was playing Iron Warriors at the time, it was like the only Iron Warriors character there was, and he was a really cool model too, right? Narek Draeger, he still fucks.
It still holds up, that model, eh?
Yeah, he still fucks. And so like, I wanted that model, and I messaged them. I'm like, hey, is there, if you host a Games Workshop event down here, or would you like do an in-store, like, for like one weekend only, you can go into Games Workshop stores and all this month. They're like, nope, Warhammer World exclusive. It's like, well, most of your player base lives outside of the UK, so we're never going to get this thing. So I went to the Recaster and I bought like fucking 10. So that back then I was buying everything legit. So that could have been 10 sales for Games Workshop, but because I
picked up Narek from Recasters as well.
Yeah. So instead of them getting all those sales of him and Score, and they didn't get any. So,
Not our
Smooth.
problem now, that one.
Yeah, they disenfranchised
Nice.
the people like us who had money to burn and loved the game.
Whoa,
So now we
I don't
don't
have that money to burn, but I'm not poor.
but
I'm not setting any on fire, Macca.
at the time, you know, I because like I finished up in the army and I cashed in like 3 straight months worth of leave or something. I had like 13 grand that to like spend. I remember dropping
buying season.
I dropped like multiple 3 grand Forge World orders, and our dollar was up too. So I bought like so much stuff. It lasted me for years. And then they just decided to make everything out of stock or last chance to buy or whatever. It's just like, I guess you don't want me to buy.
Macca,
I hope you sell
now
enough
Australian
starter sets.
for your convenience.
Yeah, I hope they sell enough starter sets to dumbasses that they can make up the gap. Because I guarantee I spent a lot more than, you know, I'd be curious how many new players have to buy a starter set to make up for what they lost from me alone. I'd be curious. And on that note, let's end the episode. So, Heresy 2.0, how would you rate it out of 10, guys? Your final like rating out of 10. If Heresy 1 is the golden like standard, and that's let's say
so are we putting
8.
1 as 10?
No, we'll say out of 10 as a game system, it was an 8. I reckon. Heresy 1. Feel free to give your own rating for Heresy 1, but I think about an 8. You know, there were definite flaws. It needed a big FAQ. The Mortal had a fantastic one for 1.0, which if they just straight cut pasted the Mortal FAQ, 1 would have been a 10.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree with that.
For me, I think Heresy 2.0 is a 6.5 if the scale's between dog shit to Heresy 1. So I think that probably puts it on the scale where Heresy 1.0 is an 8, probably about a 5. Like, it's still an enjoyable game because it shares a lot of the bones with Heresy 1, but and a lot of it, I reckon, could be fixed through Liber, or what used to be the Red Book changes, where it's the unit profiles and points.
Yeah, 100%.
But there is still like reactions as a whole, among other things, that are core problems to me in terms of the rulebook and the weapon skill chart in particular that really sort of knocks it back.
And it's not even comparing those things to Heresy 1. It's just as mechanics on their own, they fall down. That's the killer. Because like, it wouldn't matter if it was 40k. It wouldn't matter if it's Age of Sigmar. Those same mechanics are not good mechanics. Yep. Randy?
Yeah, I'm 6 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same, zone. And it's not that we don't enjoy it. Like, we've played games interstate with different groups of people, right? We've played against people from Tassie, New South, Canberra. Like, it's equivalent of
pretty much all over Australia, you could say.
Yeah. It's the equivalent of being in Europe and playing people in England, Spain, Italy, right? It's the equivalent of being in the US and playing people in like Florida, Texas, New York, right? We've been all over the place, right? We're all really consistent with how we feel about it. Maybe it's just like attracts like, but if we're all feeling this way and talking this way, and I think you look at the general downturn in content being put out by the community, like Eye of Horus, for example, is very much dried up on content. So many 30k podcasts have just ceased to exist. So I guess giving all those free boxes out to shitty shills didn't work out in the long term. Good move, G-dubs. I guess you moved a few extra boxes, though, to impressionable youth who, we won't talk about that. Anyway, that's it for me. Thank you so much to my guests, to Randy and to Darcy.
Anytime, mate.
So, thanks for having me.
I picked you guys because we played so many games together and discussed this stuff in the hut. I knew you would immediately know what we want to say. So, and to the audience, thank you for listening to the full 2 hours, and leave your thoughts below about the game mechanics. And please feel free to let me know what mechanics you think work well that we got wrong. Like, try and rationalize why reactions are great and why you don't have ADHD. I'll be all ears. And also, if you have bought and painted a Kratos recently, there is help you can get. You can talk to medical professionals. You can seek help. Self-harm is a very serious issue. And we don't want anyone to be hurt by accidentally building a Kratos. That's all from me. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you all next time.